Well, Robert, it's nice to see you again in this virtual world. I trust you're keeping well.
I do. How are you?
Good. So look, it's been about a month since the BEPS 2.0 Blueprint documents came out. What's the European perspective on where we are today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Obviously, you can approach it from various angles. I mean, if we take, for example, Pillar 2, we have the minimum tax. The big ticket question there is what is going to be the level of the rate that's going to be agreed upon. If that would be, for example, the Irish rate of 12.5%, then the questions are, what are the consequences for certain member states that have a corporate income tax rate that's below the 12.5%? And so I'm thinking about Hungary with 9%, Bulgaria 10%. Yeah, those are important questions. And in terms of the pillar or pillars, the question is, would the EU be inclined to accept only one of the pillars? So let's say Pillar 1 doesn't reach agreement, but we do have an agreement of a sufficient number of countries for Pillar 2. Would that be acceptable for the EU? Well, there we see a sort of a division. The UK and France, they seem to insist on it's a package deal, so you can't separate them. Whereas there are a number of European countries who say, well, obviously we prefer both pillars to go together, but if the reality is that we can't reach agreement on Pillar 1, let's at least go for Pillar 2. And then, yeah, if we don't have an agreement, for example, on Pillar 1, do we get DSTs? As you know, we've already seen initiatives originally by the EU, by the European Commission in March 2018, didn't make it on the ECOFIN of, what was it, December 29, 2018. There seemed not to be enough support by the member states. So a number of countries initiated their own DST: France, UK, Spain, Italy, Austria. First question is, do we get more countries that are going to follow that example? And secondly, obviously, what's going to be the reaction of the United States? Well, we saw earlier this year the so-called Section 301 investigation in the US on the French DST. And the conclusion of that investigation was that it was an unfair discrimination and targeting US multinational companies.
Right.
And for that reason, the US is considering to come up with retaliation actions. A 100% tariff on French wine and other French products. What's the US reaction going to be towards the other countries that are considering imposing a DST? And then obviously we have the most recent developments, which is Article 12b, to be included as a new article in the UN Model Treaty, which also provides for a source country tax, but in a different way. Different in the sense that you have the option to be taxed on a gross basis, but if you can demonstrate what your actual profits are, you're not going to be taxed on a gross basis, but on a net basis. That proposal has two advantages. Number one being, if you're loss making, you don't have to pay the tax. So that solution seems to be more fair and less bold.
Yes.
And has less overkill than the unilateral action that we see proposed now by European countries. And secondly, it's more easy to administer. It's not so complex. The disadvantage, however, is it is ring-fenced. It's a ring-fenced solution. And that obviously I expect is going to be a showstopper from a US perspective. So yeah, Rodney, we're living in extremely interesting times. I'm very, very interested to see how this is going to evolve further.
And the UN Article 12b option, that doesn't seem to have received that much airtime just yet, Robert. Do you think there's going to be more airtime as time progresses, or?
Yeah, I think there is a fair chance that it will get more attention, especially if we see increasing difficulties to reach an agreement on this very complex pillar 1. At the moment, it's not supported yet by one country, but I wouldn't be surprised if certain developing countries or Asian countries would pick up on this and say, we find this to be a very interesting plan B, and we would like to have this very serious consideration. But obviously, it needs to be submitted at the OECD, at the inclusive framework, because that's where the architecture takes place of the new global agreements. So it needs to move there. And the question is, how do we get it there?
I guess that just means, Robert, we just need to continue to watch this space, right? I mean, we've got the elections coming up in the United States, so who knows what that will mean for the course of travel on the global tax framework.
Yeah.
Let's see how that goes. And then we've got, like you pointed out, the retaliatory tariff situation. And then maybe
important there is that if you see who's going to be affected by the retaliations that are currently being contemplated, 100% tariffs on cheese, certain luxury consumer products, they obviously have nothing to do with the digital economy, because that it all goes back to BEPS 1, taxation of the digitalizing economy. These companies are saying, well, what do we have to do with it? Why are we suffering from something that
Right, we're not involved in?
Fair point.
Just fascinating. So we're just going to have to keep watching this space, huh, Robert? That's all you can say about it. Well, hey, look, it's really good to catch up with you again. I certainly look forward to catching up with you in person. Maybe 2021 will be the year that happens.
That's a promise. See you then.